It's the 16th of January 2022. Welcome, everybody. It's a Sunday night show, the first show of the week. We got a poll tonight. I also got some interesting pictures of Fukushima workers coming up right away in their titanium vest, which is not going to protect you really, right? It's meant to protect your organs. We'll talk about that in a moment. So we have a poll tonight. Should Japan farmers in Fukushima nuclear wasteland, which is actually 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima, be charged with crimes against humanity? And somebody accidentally voted no, I guess, but 15 votes for at the start of the show. Let's jump right into it. So, I mean, you know, they're growing food and harvesting it right alongside of nuclear waste. It's hard to imagine they're that stupid, that there's anybody on the planet that's actually that stupid. And it means they're evil, because you can't actually be that stupid. And 55 countries had banned food from 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima, all of northern Japan in 55 countries worldwide. And the problem is nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. And it's not just cancer, it also causes heart diseases and strokes, and Alzheimer's and dementia and autism in children because their parents were eating it, and diabetes because they're eating it. There's the liver problems, lung problems, pituitary glands, which regulate all kinds of functions for females so they can have successful babies. And in the animal kingdom, litters and everything else. I mean, this is an incredibly amazing picture. It just defies any kind of explanation anyway. And it does show us a total disregard by the nuclear industry, the International Atomic Energy Agencies, the nuclear regulatory committees worldwide. It shows a total disregard for humanity, for humans, to allow something like that to happen. It means they're completely dysfunctional and that they got no right to exist. It really does. You see, last year, the U.S. lifted, they claimed the FDA, but it's the nuclear industry in the United States, lifted Japan's food import restrictions with no debate, and it was never ever reported in the United States media. The same thing happened for EU. The EU media didn't report it. And in Canada, 93 days after the nuclear meltdown started, Canada lifted all food exports and never informed the population. This is major nuclear industries we're talking about doing this. And it shows this incredible hatred, this incredible contempt for all life to do something like it. It's an absurd contempt that should be met with force. They should be met with force. They're exterminating you. You should seem to defend against it, inappropriate. Doomsday-like radiation release. And what does that even mean? Doomsday-like radiation release. Well, the radiation covers the entire planet, and that's an actually model of 19 days later. If the fire and pull of Unit 4. Well, this is the fake picture of Unit 4, but you've never probably seen that unless you come to my site. This is the back of it, and what happened was one of the major medias in Japan had posted a very, very high quality picture on their site. I downloaded it, not thinking it was going to be this high quality, and was able to actually zoom right in and get an incredibly clean picture of Unit 4 from behind, never published before that picture. That's Reactor 4 over there. It's actually gone. So there is a doomsday radioactive fallout happening. But all the media worldwide, and nobody called them on it in the medias worldwide. And here's an example where they claim they're in the fuel pool at the top of a building that don't even exist.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
Now, this is patently false, what she's claiming, that she's in a fuel pool on top of a building that don't even exist anymore. Now, this could be real, and they probably would have died that week for being in that position. That would have been the homeless. That building up there is what's left of Reactor 4. It's not a 190-foot building. And then the structure you see above it and to the right of it was built off-site and brought in by cranes and assembled. And the idea was to make you think, now, anybody stood up this close to the reactor are getting incredible, brutal doses, but you can see what's left of the reactor building up there. Hang on, I'll fix this. Maybe. Up there is not a 190-foot building, right? And so they built this structure here, which doesn't physically touch what's left of this building. This is what it actually looks like underneath the cap that they put on. And then they showed you this story here, said it looks like that when it actually looks like this. And Arnie Gunnarsson, of course, he made the assemblies for those fuel pools, and he pretends even today that the fuel pool looks like the one to the left and not to the right.
Now, the division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima.
And so the fuel pools would have been at the very top of the buildings. You see the red depiction up there and over there? And they can hold at least 6 million pounds each. And behind me is the reactor core. It runs up to the top of the building. These were 190-foot buildings, and there's nothing left. And you can see through the building on the very bottom of it.
The division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima.
And so if he doesn't know, then who actually does? So why was he lying to everybody? That is a terrifying question, by the way. Doomsday-like radiation if there was a fire in the pool. And obviously there's a fire and the pool no longer exists, and this is what the doomsday-like radiation looks like. So when you see pictures like this, nuclear scientists are not going to dress up like that. You're getting a lethal dose there when you're wearing that kind of equipment. You can see another example to the left of the guy with a full organ protective lead vest on. And he's by, I'm not sure which reactor he's by. I think it's Reactor 2, but don't quote me. And here's another example of titanium vest. And the guy alongside of him looks to be wearing the lead vest shield. Now you can see a guy on each side of this feller are wearing full organ. Now you can't actually protect you from radiation with these suits. It will go right through that. This particular shot was really interesting because when you zoomed in on him, you see pixelation. So why did they blur that out right alongside of him? What was the point of doing that? Why did they redact? Now, also remember, they're wearing paper suits. They burn allegedly 7,000 paper suits each day. And you can see the guy right here is wearing a full vest too. These are the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. But it's really interesting of why is that blurred? Why was that pixelated? What was the point of that? Now, if you look at the ground there, everywhere you look, you see one thing in common: steel plates. Everywhere. No matter where you look, you see those steel plates. And they're rusted, obviously. We counted the tanks in the best pictures, and we got a total of 750 tanks. And that's if you include those small tanks. You got 750 tanks, not 1,000 like they claim. By the way, they had 1,000 tanks in 2013. So why they got 1,000 tanks in 2022 then? So the building doesn't exist, but they're pretending they're getting fuel out of a pool. You don't need to know nothing else. You know they're lying. And the only reason they would lie, and worldwide in the media about something like that, because it's an extinction level event for the planet. These journalists are pretending they're on top of a fuel pool that don't even exist. Like throughout history, we see people get positions of authority and then they become extremely cruel immediately. Fukushima is like eating a banana and walking in sunshine and flying on an airplane. But it's not like eating a banana or walking in sunshine or flying on an airplane at all. So why is it that all medias and journalists worldwide regurgitate that exact narrative? Because that's how you make a living being a journalist. Is your job is to trick the population into complacency. The International Atomic Energy Agency is not an agency at all. It's the protector of the genocide machine, and nuclear is a genocide machine. And so Homer Simpson was the same reason as they created the Hulk and Spider-Man, was to trick your children and yourselves into complacency in increments over decades till it was firmly embedded in your conscience. So you have all kinds of journalists pretending they're on a pool that doesn't exist, which meant the major media, CBS, BBC, CNN, ABC, and the rest of them, the editors and the producers and the owners of these medias had to participate in that cover-up. It's an amazing cover-up when you think about it, isn't it? And tomorrow night we're going to do another die-off video. Part 2 of 2021 recap is the plan. Now, I was out looking for species today, and 0 birds. I posted a little video from the trail. Let me see. And the idea of the video, I was testing out a new app to get the video to stream in portrait, which is full screen like you're looking at now. Whereas typically the cell phone Androids will only stream in a stand-up mode, and it's okay for the conversation, but it's no good for the picture, right? So we finally got that to work. That's amazing. That was due to a comment left on my last video that when I was out looking for birds. Somebody had said I had portrait locked. It turned out it wasn't locked. Google has it locked and you can't unlock it. But there is an app that allows your phone to show up as portrait. So I was super happy today. No birds flying or in the forest again today. And my feet are still cold. So cold today. That's terrifying news, by the way. And don't drink sake. Don't eat Japanese food. I mean, that's one of the few things you can do. Don't buy Japanese product. That's really important. They have to be punished for the genocide they're committing. I'm begging the planet to please think about what you're doing by shipping radioactive food worldwide from a nuclear wasteland. The implications are just horrendous. There should be immediate executions of the people that allowed this to happen publicly. On top of that, we live in a changed world, and we need to adapt by holding these people as an example for the rest of the nuclear industry not to go that route. And you can see they've been at it a very long time. Children with dosimeters, rather than let them evacuate, they gave them instruments they can't read themselves, and that the university students in the nuclear industry will study these children for the rest of their life like lab rats. It's hard to imagine something more frightening than 5-year-olds marching off to the irradiated school playgrounds with Geiger counters strapped to their necks. The only thing more frightening than that is the people that allowed it to happen and that gave them the Geiger counters and didn't evacuate them. It's incredible, hideous. Some of the scariest pictures imaginable is being in a paper suit not very far from a raging nuclear meltdown. These people would have died that day or that week. He would have died that day. And away we go. Finland ends homelessness and provides shelter for everybody. They just got sick of it, and they said, they're living on the streets, and the only way they can survive is crimes and harassing everybody and the tourists and everything else. And so they just decided to end homelessness. You get a free apartment and lights and power and everything else without any preconditions. And 4 to 5 people affected thus make their way back into a stable life. It's amazing. It's an incredible story, actually. We have another story. A junior hockey team from Russia and the Czech Republic ejected from the plane. This is children, by the way. Children. And the industry now this is allegedly because of coronavirus. They wouldn't wear their mask. And they were socializing on a plane. And they were here in Canada for hockey, junior hockey. These are just high school students, basically. And they were kicked off the plane and had no way to make it home. This is children. And abandoned by the Canadian governments and other governments in order to set an example to brainwash your children into never questioning draconian measures. So it's unconscionable that you would abandon these children. These are hockey players the day before and have been kicked off airplanes and abandoned. It's just incredibly, unbelievably, unimaginably a betrayal of everything as a society that we represent. Russia junior team was back and trying to smoke cigarettes. You used to always smoke. Everybody used to smoke on planes. In fact, a lot of the planes still have ashtrays built into the seats. The plane is not going to fall out of the sky because somebody smoked a cigarette. The team were going from the junior championships in Red Deer, Canada, and Edmonton, and were canceled Wednesday due to the coronavirus infections, which is because Canada lifted the regulation on Japanese nuclear wastelands food. The best we can tell, coronavirus is the cover story for Fukushima illnesses. And let me explain that just a little bit to you. I have a real simple way of explaining it. It's also the cover story for global warming. Fukushima radioactive fallout is what you're looking at. This model is only 20 days. If we went another 10 days with the model, the rest of the planet is gone too, right? So, but Japan, if it's this bad worldwide, imagine how bad it is in a nuclear wasteland where they're growing the food. And so people eat that, they get sick. And the sicknesses of coronavirus, by the way, I'm now doing a series on coronavirus at BitChute. I posted the first episode this morning. that I finally finished 3 o'clock this morning. Took 4.5 hours because they're 50 gigabyte files. Took 4.5 hours to render that down to an acceptable number in order to be uploaded to BitChute. It's an absurd amount of work that I do. And then I was in the woods all day looking for animal tracks and birds, and we found neither. And I'll be heading in again tomorrow. Then the next day is rain and warmer weather. Then the next day it drops back down to minus 10 or 15 again for a week with more intermittent snow. Hopefully enough we can go looking for tracks. So I'm going to head in again tomorrow, no matter how tired I am, because it'll be raining the next day. There won't be no tracks, right? So tomorrow I'll be able to see if there's any tracks in the last 24 hours, where today it was only 10 hours, the snow was only 10 hours old. How would a global and small nuclear war impact our planet, comparing catastrophes? And so Interesting Engineering is actually a pro-nuclear organization. They'll create a lot of these sites, and that's meant to suck in people without them understanding that this is just a public relation firm site. Well, they already had a nuclear war. It was called weapons testing. And some of the bombs, like one of the Soviet Union's bombs, for instance, was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki-size, Hiroshima-sized nuclear bombs going off at the same time, equal to 3,800 nuclear weapons going off at the same time. That's a nuclear war. It's the same radioactive fallout as a nuclear war. The sun didn't disappear, etc., right? And so that story of the sun is going to disappear for 10 years, that was cooked up by 2 guys who published a paper, and then all of Hollywood and everybody else ran with that version, because it's the opposite of fact. Yeah, we live in that world now. They're all about that life. This ingenious wall could harness enough wind power to cover your electric bill. Anybody seen this before? These are all small generators, windmill generators. How messed up is that? And they spin, and so the wall is 8 feet by something. 8 feet tall and 25 feet wide. That's pretty crazy, isn't it? And that produces enough power for your home. It's very quiet, apparently. And you have it alongside of your building, and so it's not intrusive, and it looks kind of decorative, right? Many wind farms are in the ocean, but they should be on the mountains where the wind blows all the time. And the windiest places is not in the ocean, it's top of the mountains. Or the mountains alongside the ocean, because you have a temperature inversion right there. And this was the site where I found that guy too. Wind wall turbines. He also had another one there. But I think it's a really important design, right? Because you haven't got to build big towers, right? It's not complicated at all. I just thought we should share that with everybody. Japan nuclear research set to revive on U.S. fast-reactor project. This is like the Manju reactor Japan had. They don't know how to decommission it. They never built a way to decommission it in it when they made it, which shows you the nuclear industry is a lunatic industry. And you can't introduce water into these reactors or oxygen, they'll detonate. So how the hell are you going to decommission it? How does that actually work? And Bill Gates wants to build one when these are basically the same reactors we've seen melt down in many places over the last number of decades. The lunatic Japan Atomic Energy Agency, which is not an agency, it's a lobbying group for the nuclear industry, are going to collaborate should they can't even decommission their own reactors. And you're going to let these creepy, disgusting parasites build a reactor in the United States because United States engineers are stupid or something? Give me a break. Call the Midwife creator says nuclear test veteran still needs answers 70 years on. This is a TV show in the United Kingdom about radiation victims from nuclear testing. And 70 years later, the veterans down there have still not been recognized. And they're talking, some of them got just endless tumors throughout their bodies. And they're trying to convince them, the nuclear industry is trying to convince them it's all in their head. The first episode aired last night. The BBC One drama returned to its story of test survivors that start a family. And a record 7.3 million viewers saw the young couple lose their first son, who was born without legs below the knee and died soon after. And it comes on the 70th anniversary of the Operation Hurricane, Britain's first nuclear test in 1952. Now in Britain, of course, done a lot of tests in Australia, in Marilingo and Montebello, where they waited for the winds to blow across Australia and then they set off their nuclear weapons. And in one case, I'm not sure it was 1,400 kilometers or 2,400 kilometers away from Adelaide, where they set off the nuclear weapon. After waiting for the wind to blow across the country, Adelaide had seen their Geiger counters hit 96,000 counts per minute sustained, which obviously should have been abandoned. And then Britain, of course, set off around 700 dirty bombs in Australia, where they wrapped conventional explosives onto uranium and plutonium and detonated that, and still contaminated, well, for at least 250,000 years down there. They were inspired by a neighbor in their village who became infertile after serving at the nuclear test sites. And that's how she wrote, that was the inspiration for writing about the nuclear test veteran. As she learned about it, she realized, holy cow, 22,000 victims took part in the 45 nuclear tests. And there was 600 radioactive minor trials. Well, these trials might have been 10 or 15 tests individually, by the way. Or what they call on highly toxic trigger devices. In America, Australia, South Pacific. Between 1952 and 1991, fewer than 3,000 survivors are thought to still be alive at 22,000. And their children reported 10 times the normal rates of birth defects. We covered one headline from the United Kingdom where it asked Boris Johnson to look the nuclear test veterans in the eyes and tell them that they were imagining their deformed children's illnesses. Michael Lunatic Wolseley, and there's so many degenerates out there, the media is happy and easily have an endless pick of degenerates to perpetrate these crimes against all species. Come back, nuclear energy, all is forgiven. What do you mean? Well, what specifically is it you're forgiving, Wolseley? Some 5,000, mostly young followers, turned up, as the Irish Times reported. Hippies and punks found themselves allied in the fight to keep Ireland a nuclear-free zone. So you were a hippie or a punk if you were advocating no nuclear. You're instantly labeled anti-nuclear, and which puts you into a category now where police are allowed to beat you up or your loved ones or your children up. The news broke of a leak at 3 Mile Island nuclear plant in the U.S. in an ineffectual attempt to suppress the story. There's never been much support for Irish nuclear energy. It's illegal to have nuclear power in Ireland, by the way. And public opinion now swung decisively against it after 3 Mile Island. Well, what you see out of all of these stories over all these years is one consistent thing. Where your media has been captured, your universities have been captured, all of them, by the nuclear industry in increments, and key positions in your governments have all been captured, particularly the funding parts of government for the nuclear industry. They've been captured by the nuclear industry. And they hate us. They hate all the species, all the way to the bacteria, all the way up to the whales. They despise them. And we've documented this now for many, many years. They have done everything they can to exterminate the species. They've never done anything to protect a single species in the nuclear industry. And they're perpetual liars. And this is why we end up having to do these shows constantly, is to just, there's a word for it, Machiavellian, I guess. It's evil by design. That's what they do for a living. DEMA, to test emergency sirens at Salem nuclear plant. Like, if you can hear a nuclear siren, you need to sell your property and move 50 miles away at least. Try to sell it to somebody in the nuclear industry. Testing emergency sirens, you're talking about 80 to 100 sirens. This one has 37 sirens. It's typically 80 to 100. And that rule was created by morally driven people who protested these creatures, and they couldn't get rid of them, so they said, well, put sirens. We want sirens put around these places so people can have a warning system so they can run away if there's a release. But you know who's in charge of making the sirens work? They are. They're not going to warn you. That's one thing we know for sure. And in that 3 Mile Island, the governor at the time was quite proud. He's dead now. He was quite proud that he didn't evacuate the people. After a couple of days, he evacuated children and pregnant women, but it was too late, wasn't it? It's an absurd amount of contempt for all species, and it has no right to exist. And the best thing this planet can do, this is figuratively speaking, of course, is drown them in buckets of vomit, everything in the nuclear industry, as an incentive for the future nuclear industry not to rear its despicable heads again. European Union draws up plan to label natural gas, and I know that might sound crazy to you, to drown these people in a bucket of whatever. It's a figure of speech. It's the ultimate contempt that I can say that's hard to use against me, right? They legally should be convicted of crimes against humanity, like the Fukushima farmers, and summarily and publicly executed for their crimes against humanity and all species on the planet. The European Union draws a plan to label natural gas, nuclear energy as green investments. So, of course, now the European Union has zero credibility just by even suggesting it, let alone going and do it. What's the point of having a taxonomy when you're going to use it to promote nuclear? It's literally the stupidest thing imaginable on top of that, where they got up until 2045 to get the permits to start a nuclear power plant. It could take 20 years to build one at that stage, of course, which means they'll exterminate all species. There's no hope with nuclear on our planet. We have no future, period, as long as nuclear power plants and the nuclear waste is still on land. The problem with the nuclear waste is it's hemorrhaging radiation from the nuclear fuel pools. They take the reactor cores out. The reactor cores, they split the atom to produce power. And the amount of atoms they produce to create power there's not enough zeros in the universe to actually articulate how many dangerous radioactive atoms we're talking. When you take the fuel out of the reactor after 12, 14 months and put it in a fuel pool at the top of the building with no containments, it's still splitting the atoms. Now the atoms are hemorrhaged into the environment forever. What I mean by that is you're still creating 1 million homes worth of power each day from every 14 months or so. You're taking that fuel and putting in more fuel, and every 14 months more fuel, another 1 million homes, another 14 months, another 1 million homes, and 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, by the way, because all nuclear waste is doing this fairly high level, right? And those atoms are released into the environment all day. It's the whole conversation. This is absurdness. These are perpetual disease factories for all species. So the European Union is not a union, it's taken over by the nuclear industry. And then you got Marvel, Evil Hulk. Well, the Hulk was created not by Marvel, but by the nuclear industry to indoctrinate your children. And is headed underwater to destroy Atlanta. And so this should be a crime that they use these nuclear industry props to indoctrinate our children into becoming complacent. That's unequivocally a crime if you look at what the ultimate result of this kind of indoctrination does to all the species and humans. You got another example of that is Pokemon. Of course, people travel from all over to find these Pokemon, virtual reality Pokemon. And Pokemon now is being used for the last number of years to lure people into the Fukushima Prefecture, in the harm's way, to look for a fictional cartoon. It just doesn't even seem possible. Emma Watson, a famous actress, posted in support of Palestine. Now, Israel, a few years ago, started taking food from Japan. Israel's not stupid. And no doubt they're going to give the radioactive food from Fukushima to the Palestinians. It's interesting because Israel created 5 million refugees, but they can't get rid of 10,000 Hamas. They got no problem keeping the 5,000 refugees out. In fact, Israel actually has concentration camps surrounded with barbed wire, patrolled by German shepherds and Nazi-like guards to keep the Palestinians in perpetual misery. So they can't have a bank account, their children can't go to school, they can't get medical because they live in these concentration camps. It's a lunatic country, it really is. And we also got Israel attacked Pakistan's nuclear program, sabotaging everything else, like they did with Iraq and Syria, right? Where they actually blew up the nuclear power plants. Was it Syria? I can't remember off the top of my head. Here's a French nuclear power plant surrounded by farms. These are 100% crimes against humanity again. You gotta be incredibly evil to build nuclear power plants in prime farmland. And this is where 90% of all power plants are being built over the last 70 years, because the radioactive fallout ends, the heavy stuff will end up in the farm food, and that's shipped out. That's murder on a whole different scale. And it's not an accident, it's actually on purpose. And you'll see that worldwide of all nuclear power plants. At the 440 on the planet, at least 400 of them are built directly in the center of farmland. EDF chief sees power price surge spurring nuclear reform efforts. And you can see the arrogance on his face. And French nuclear power plants, I mean, it's not a coincidence, it's not an accident that they built these in farm countries. It's an agenda. There was a mystery brain illness in Canada because Canada removed all the embargoes against Japan. And so people got incredible radioactive illnesses. And one of them is going to be brain damage from radiation. It usually manifests in obesity. So when you start seeing a huge spike in obesity, you got all these healthy people just randomly within a year or two become obese. That's radiation poisoning. And you only need to eat the radioactive food a single time to get radiation poisoning. So imagine if you're eating it in increments over a decade, what's going to happen. And so the coronavirus is meant to cover up Fukushima radiation illnesses worldwide and blame it on the coronavirus. They knew that diseases would spike within 10 years and deaths, and so coronavirus was created specifically to cover up. So they're got genocide on our planet. A whistleblower. Told the Guardian's dementia-like condition, dementia and autism, and Alzheimer's is created by radiation. And we don't know. That's a story that showed up that I'll be keeping an eye on. Polaris 21, a high-intensity combat exercise on board French's aircraft carrier, the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier. These are nuclear. And the high-intensity combat exercise, first off, France not going to war against anybody without America or Britain to back them up. They're incapable, right? They're simply incapable. And if they want a war, why don't they go down and attack Iran? Because Iran will be happy to pummel them. Organized by France to ensure operational readiness. Their military is a coward. They only attack countries with no military, no air force, no navy, no weapons manufacturing abilities. It's a coward society, right? Umbilical cord blood donations offer hope for those in Japan in need of stem cells. And Japan needs a lot of stem cells. And the problem is that that's still not going to solve the issue. The best solution for cancers is DCA. Dectachlorite, and I probably butchered the name. I'll bring it up for you. DCA. Now, Canada banned it 4 years ago. They didn't want people treating themselves for radiation, but you can order it on Amazon.com. Right? .com, not .ca if you're Canada. And they ship to Canada. You'll see it there. We ship to Canada when you go. Yeah, like, see that there? We ships to Canada. And what this does is unplate your blood, and cancer can't survive. And within 3 weeks, it had reduced all tumors, hard tumors included, by 70%, which meant the tumors were no longer pressing on the organs and you didn't need invasive emergency surgeries. And it cured all cancers within 3 months. This was discovered in Canada, and there was no adverse side effects, and you didn't need a prescription because it's just a mineral. It's harmless. And Canada, without no debate, banned it immediately when it started becoming popular, which is, it shows you how evil the industry is, that the only cure out there, they actually banned it. It's hard to imagine something more evil than doing that. This incredible, unbelievable, hideous, monstrous contempt. The Pentagon and the CIA have shaped thousands and thousands and thousands of Hollywood movies into super effective propaganda. That should terrify everybody. And you should read that article. Propaganda is most impactful when people don't think it's propaganda. And the most decisive when it's censorship you never knew happened. So instead of telling the real story in a Hollywood movie, they tell the official cover-up story. And television shows, not just movies, but television shows of every variety. The military guests and the celebrations of the U.S. military on game shows and cooking shows are no more spontaneous or civilian in origins than the ceremonies glorifying members of the U.S. military at professional sports games. Ceremonies that have been paid for and choreographed by U.S. tax dollars and the U.S. military. They're completely out of control, see? There's no incentive anymore not to be evil. There's a big incentive to be evil. An incredible incentive now to be evil. And there's enough sociopaths in our society They'll go and get a university degree just to get those jobs. Key lessons from the proliferations of disinformation. That's a couple of stories. That one there. And this one here that everybody should try to read to get a grip on so you don't get lulled into complacency when you're watching. Now more than ever, disinformation has the ability to influence policy decision makers. Propaganda, disinformation. So what I bring to the table is solid, rock solid verification that we are in real trouble. We are facing an extinction event. And the research expeditions we carried out over the last decades have quantified that statement. North Korea fires a ballistic missile. And I'll show you how this works. First off, the United Nations went to war with North Korea, not America or Britain or anybody else. It was United Nations. One of the first things they done after becoming United Nations was they burnt every community in North Korea, with napalm, which is incredible incinerary liquid. They burnt down every community, but that's collective punishment. That's a war crime on its own, by the way. And around 3 million civilians dead, in both North and South, and 10 million vicious wounds from the artilleries. And South Korea carried out all kinds of genocide against sympathizers of the North Korea, where they rounded up tens of thousands of people and just executed them. South Korea is no better than... So here's how it works. South Korea fires a missile, America fired 10, Russia fired 30 at the same time. But all the media come out screaming to indoctrinate the population that Korea fired a missile. Wah, wah, Korea fired a missile. Wah, wah, we fired a missile. Wah. And look at it. Everything just come out to indoctrinate the population. Wah, they fired a missile. Wah, they fired a missile. Korea, never mind. America got how many nuclear weapons again? How many crimes against humanity committed? EU delays deadline on green finance taxonomy rules for nuclear and gas. Now, France took over the EU presidency on January the 1st. This is why they put it off for a whole year before they made a decision, because France wanted to be in a position to go with a stroke of a pen. Such an evil country. The whole history of France is despicable. They really are the persona of evilness. The Commission drafted a plan late last year to add some gas and nuclear. No, it adds nuclear everywhere. It's not green taxonomy. This year, or last year, 2021, it was 290 gigawatts of renewable energy came online. That's equal to 333 nuclear power plants worth of renewables. Can we build 333 nuclear power plants in 12 months? In fact, that number was from 11 months. Can we build 333 nuclear power plants in 11 months? And each year, it kind of doubles, or 50% anyway, right? And so they estimated at 2026, in 4 years' time, there will be 5,500 nuclear power plants, the big ones, 1,000 megawatts, a gigawatt each. There'll be 5,500 gigawatts, or 4,800 gigawatts of renewable energies on the planet, which is equal to 5,500 nuclear power plants, which is equal to all the current nuclear power plants and all the fossil fuel plants combined on the planet in just the next 4 years, what they expect to come online. So at 10 years down the road, we'll have more than enough renewables to power the planet for infinity. And it doesn't stop there, obviously, see? They got another sirens going off in Catawba nuclear station. They got 89 sirens within 10-mile radius. The sirens should be moved. We've had polls on this. Should the sirens be moved out to 50 miles? Should they have 1,000 sirens within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant? And they should, right? Because the radiation doesn't just stop at 10 miles. It's an absurd suggestion. And let me explain that to you. Here's Fukushima, a nuclear power plant, radioactive fallout, covers the entire planet. Here's another model of plutonium from Fukushima covering the entire planet. So a 10-mile sirens doesn't really do it justice, does it? Most citizens should hear nothing with the newly implemented growl test. Most you'll hear is a low growling sound. And around 200,000 people live within 10-mile radius, which means they're all poisoned. And you see one of the examples of that, where you see more males and females being born. That's going to be true for all species. As it was after nuclear testing changed the sex ratio of male to female worldwide, because everybody was poisoned. And so it just couldn't be them. It had to be all the animals and mammals and insects too. It can't just be humans. So if you hear the alarm, don't panic. You do not need to complete any sort of drill, but you actually do need to complete a drill. Because if there's traffic blocks up, how are you going to get out of harm's way? You need to have a backup plan. You need to practice. You need to have a runaway bag, a packed bag, so with all your papers and your bank and your mortgages and everything inside of it. So if you got to run away because you can't come back, how do you sue the corporation and the government for doing it to you? Green nuclear power, greenwashing. Well, it's greenwashing. And so the Irish Times, the EU must spend $550 billion on nuclear to meet the climate goal. So this is the nuclear industry, obviously, talking this way, which you're talking almost $700 billion US on nuclear. First off, by the time, if they spent today, went out and they got $550 billion to build a nuclear, in 4 years' time, there'll be enough renewables on the planet to replace all nuclear and all fossil plants. So within 2 years of that, before 2030, before they can implement 1/100th of what they would have the money to do, it would become obsolete technology, and there would be no way to deny it. Right? So this is the drowning man tactic, where you try to rescue somebody, they're drowning, they drown you. That's what the nuclear industry is attempting to take down the whole planet with it. So having farms right up to a nuclear power plant. Now, if you go on the main road and stop and take pictures, you'll get confronted. But the farmer, he's not going to get confronted because he's going to whisk the radioactive fallout away and poison people. So he's put on a pedestal. EU moves ahead with plans to label gas and nuclear. It's not the EU, it's France that's doing it. It's such a stupid thing to give away the sovereignty of your countries, put it in the hands of 10 people that are appointed, not elected, and they make the decision that affects your future and your children's future. Literally, the stupidest thing imaginable was to create this creature known as the EU. It has no legitimacy. It's a tool of the industry. And the scum, degenerate, small modular reactors, they don't have one. None exist, and they're going to go public because the nuclear industry will buy into that stuff, see? A desperate attempt to keep the nuclear industry head above the water, they'll drown everybody on the planet. France's new generation nuclear plant delayed again. French third generation reactors, one in the United Kingdom, it might never come online. It's a decade behind schedule and it's 3 times the cost. They can't load it with fuel, and this has been delayed year after year. This is like a decade behind and billions above. Is a $22 billion giant magnet the holy grail of clean energy? No, of course not. This is absurdness. $22 billion magnet. Like, they'll use every precious metal on the planet in this fable rather than concentrate on something tangible. Right? It's better. That's how this industry works. It destroys all the resources on fables because they don't want it used to come up with a real society. There's and the people that are doing this are just people. If you got rid of those people, like if they all got an ice pick in their head, the world could just move forward and have a future. Which is what we used to do. We used to get rid of our problems. We didn't let our problems fester. Now you create these monsters through industry, and they think that they're the arbiters of all species' futures, and the media is happy to play along with it. A 23,000-ton, again, this is in France, right? The fusion experiment is a 50 million pounds of precious material being used to see if they can crack. This is many countries, by the way, participating in this. It's about evilness. That's as far as we can tell. They've done so many of these experiments, and these are meant to make weapons, ultimately. These are not meant to benefit humanity in even the slightest way. If you took all the people and all the resources that went into that and solved the riddle of storage for cities and everything else, then you would have the leisure now of coming up with technology like that. But to put that on the forefront where it could take 50 or 500 years to come to fruition and let the planet whittle and die and all the species on it, rather than address the most important thing first, is I despise and I disrespect the people that are doing that. I have unbelievable contempt for the people that are putting our welfare in positions like that. Heart diseases causes early brain dysfunction. Heart disease is, of course, one of the first things you get from radiation, and can treble key Alzheimer's protein. It looks to me like this is the cover story. This is a study that came out at the University of Sheffield, which has a long history of being a pro-nuclear scumbag. Heart diseases is brought on by eating Fukushima food or Chernobyl food or Three Mile food or Santa Susana radioactive contaminated food, etc., right? The University of Sheffield, which is right there, and Sellafield is up there, of course, but a lot of nuclear industry, these are schools of mass destruction. It built up a plaque in the blood vessels of the brain, and the best way to treat that is DCA, like I showed you earlier. That's the best way you're going to treat something. When it comes to plaque in the blood, that's what DCA does. It restores the blood. This is a strange picture. French nuclear power push sends energy giant EDF stocks into a downward spiral, right? See the little plane in the bottom there? And that's a nuclear power plant in the background. A disease factory. Shares in France's energy company plummeted on Friday. The government ordered it to sell more cheap nuclear power. Now, the only reason they're doing this is because the French election is coming up. That's the only reason they're doing it that way. Otherwise, you just gouge everybody in France. Remember, they had an energy crisis in 2018, and I can't remember how many thousands of cars protesters burnt. The protesters in France are a lot different than everywhere else. I'll show you an example. France protesters are the best, I think, in the world. Let me see if I can find it really quick for you. My feet are still frozen from today. That was miserable, eh? Let's try the other one. It's always one or the other. There you go. This is the proper way to protest. Wearing flowers and trying to be peaceful is a waste of time.
The clashes were violent and widespread. Hundreds of police and anti-nuclear protesters chased each other through the fields and woodland near Vallon. Roadblocks were set up to try to prevent more protesters converging on the area, but at one point a group managed to block a section of the railway line. Fierce
I love it, eh? We got a poll going on tonight, for anybody who's not paying attention. Should Japan's farmers in Fukushima nuclear wasteland be charged with crimes against humanity? We have an amazing 88% says yes, and a couple of people that didn't understand the question voted no, apparently. That makes no sense. Why would you vote no? Under a government decree to be passed by the end of the month, the coal plants will likely, and now they're opening up coal plants, right, in France. And like normally the coal plants would do 1,000 hours a year. They're going to do 1,000 hours by February next month. France's nuclear champions sacrificed to stave off energy crisis. The problem with France is that the inbreeds of the inbreeds of the inbreeds of the nuclear industry are currently in positions of authority there in the government, but also their children are working for the nuclear industry. And if you pull that out from underneath it, they become just everyday schmucks, so to speak, right? They no longer have these incredible amounts of money coming in. And so they'll kill the whole country to keep their jobs. And their job ultimately sacrifices the entire planet. Macron's nuclear populism exposes the abject failure of our energy policies. You know, that's an interesting thing about France is why, if France was adamant that it was going to have nuclear in the future, why did it wait until the very last second? Why didn't it start building nuclear reactors every 10 years? Right? They knew their reactors were going to become decrepit and dysfunctional and brittle and everything from that Wigner effect of bombardments of neutrons in the middle. Why did he wait until now to come out and say, no, we want to be nuclear? Why do you wait till the last minute when it takes 10 to 15 years to build a nuclear power plant? It takes 5 years just to lay out the plant site and do the surveys, $500 million for that. I don't see humans surviving in 20 years. I really don't, with what Fukushima got done to the planet. If nuclear power is the key to Canada's green future, which is not, Ottawa needs to say so now. And of course, the World Nuclear News Association praised Canada's clean energy. The World Nuclear News is a lobbying group for the nuclear industry. They're not news, they're the lobbyists. They're even registered as a lobbyist. The US and China could soon be in a race for nuclear-powered satellites. And because what my organization, the nuclearproctologist.org, and the idea of the nuclear proctologist is I look into places nobody else looked into, basically, right? So when I go out, look at the nuclear, like I'm basically a self-taught forensic investigative journalist, but a nuclear expert at the same time on these subjects, right? Because I provide the documentations for all my assertions. It's not an opinion. I don't have opinions. And if I do, I make it very clear that, and it's very rare I'll talk about opinions. The US and China could soon be in a race for nuclear power satellites. So my organization advocates no satellite nuclear power in space whatsoever because it's man-made. It has no right to be in space. Like, it's not made of the elements from the solar system. Like a spaceship is typically made of elements from the solar system. But man-made anthropogenic radiation is not. The sun doesn't make the isotopes from nuclear power plants. Police hunt for large drone seen flying over Forsmark, a nuclear plant. So they launched drones to find the drone, and helicopters, of course, and patrols to catch whoever flew a drone over a shitty nuclear power plant. First up, nuclear power plants are built like fortresses. Second off, this is just pure fear-mongering so they can get money. The U.S. must compensate islanders for Pacific nuclear testing. So should France. So should United Kingdom, obviously. It's high time for the United States to express its gratitude and paid step to Pacific Islanders who endured the infernos and the radioactive fallout of the nuclear weapons war. They call it a test, but it's actually a war. Same bombs, same radioactive fallout. And gratitude is due because the Bikini and Inawaktak Islands served as experimental sites, viral for the U.S. superpower status then and today. It's 100% true. Again, we see this. Every country that went to other countries and done its nuclear weapons testing and destroyed the countries refused to acknowledge there are any adverse effects. In fact, the nuclear industry even today refuses to acknowledge that nuclear has adverse effects. So they don't got a right to exist. All they seem to be intent on doing is exterminating you and your loved ones and all the species. Not seem to be doing, that's exactly what they are doing. End of the world warning, as scientists feared a sixth mass extinction. And the research expeditions, if you look at my last video on marine life, I show some of the expeditions. My research expeditions to Alaska, from Vancouver to Alaska year after year, shows a 100% undeniable extinction level event. That's an extinction level event. Why nuclear power can never be green. Of course, nuclear is the most carbon intensive thing on the planet. And just for a nuclear power plant to run, it needs two external power plants, coal plants, oil plants, gas plants. And coal, oil, and gas plants don't produce emissions that cover the entire planet, and they don't produce emissions that pulses energy every second at the speed of light for millions of years. This is global warming. Radioactive fallout is global warming. It's been going on for 75 years. You can trace it all the way back to the nuclear industry. Talk focuses on ending Japan's food ban. The Taipei Times, whoever is running that business should be arrested for sedition in Taiwan. They're the worst thing can happen to Taiwan. This is most likely a nuclear lobbying group that started that up. This is not Taipei Times. This is sedition, what they're doing. This is 100% traitors that work for this organization and write these articles. These are 100% traitors. These are unequivocally 100% degenerate scumbags. Ooh. Let's finish it out, I guess. So Taiwan again trying to trick the population into taking food from a nuclear wasteland. Again, and then their narrative keeps suggesting that Taiwan's right on the edge of lifting the ban. Got to keep the pressure on. They're going to lift the ban. But that's not actually true. That's actually not true at all. They said public health is more important than considering the Fukushima food imports. And they're under a lot of pressure from the nuclear industry, and which is, see, people think of TEPCO and stuff like that. It's not TEPCO. This is the nuclear industry itself. It's a revolting, hateful, despicable, coward industry. And so KMT says they're not importing food into Taiwan. And Finland says, fake studies out of Finland claiming that they got massive support for nuclear power. Well, they don't have massive support for nuclear power at all. This is what I mean. Like, there's really no media on the planet. It's just this gobblish creature that portrays itself as a media. There's actually no media on the planet. Okay, and so I just done an easy show tonight because I had a long day today out in the woods looking for birds. And I got a long day tomorrow out in the woods looking for birds and animal tracks. So hopefully I'll get a few hours sleep tonight. And I'll get up tomorrow morning, suit up. It's minus 16 or something tonight. Why is it so? Yeah, back to this question before we call it a day. You got, now the suit he's wearing is a lead line one, if I remember correctly, right? The titanium suits that the homeless are wearing looks like that. That's out in front of Reactor 3. You know you're getting a lethal dose when you wear that thing. But the question was, why did they pixelate out that part of his jacket? Was there a hole there or something? Because you know how anal this industry actually is. Or was there something there that just said what site this was at? I don't know. That's such a strange picture, yeah? That's good. Okay, so remind people of how to donate to me because we get so few donations. I don't know, that's such a strange picture. We get so few donations. Hi everybody. If you go underneath my videos, all the way to the bottom, there's 2 ways to donate to me. Both of these are directly to my ways to donate to me. The PayPal is directly to my PayPal, Dana Durnford. And the Nuclear Proctologist site, which is my site, I just let the page cycle. You can see it cycling up there. Let it load up. And there should be a picture shows up. There we go. Underneath that picture is the donate button, which you can donate with credit cards. And as you scroll down, if you don't know much about this subject, that's a perfect video for you right there. That's the first video on my new site here. As you took down, look, all my other videos. These pictures here, all you do is click on it, and either side of it will get you forward or backwards. And this is research expeditions. And so you can download all of these pictures and print them out and have a debate about them, make it into a little booklet. To your left is what it should look like, and these are before and after authentic pictures. I went up and done the research expeditions, and the species never came back, right? And below all of these pictures, and that's incredible pictures, that's an extinction event, are pictures of Reactor 3. And up there you can see the fuel pool at the very top of the buildings. And comparison pictures, what it looks like, what it should look like. And so you know the fuel is gone, right? And then headlines. So if you click on any of them, they'll open up, you can read the headlines. And you can make a little book out of it and give it pass the little booklets out, just print them out, staple them together, and you got 50-page books of documentation. And you also have other material. My site is full of it. And I regularly do articles on this site. At the very top of the page, you see headlines from the Nuclear Proctologist. If you click on that, give it a second. Nuclear meltdown, marine species die-off recap. That was my last video. EU taxonomy and stuff like that. Horror today, Canada committed genocide against Canadians is a really important story. And so if you click on that, then that'll take you over to the article, or you right-click it, you can open another page. And I provide a lot of documentation below it. So same thing with all these stories here. If you click on the picture, it expands. And almost all of the pages, at the bottom of the pages, you'll find these types of headlines. And so you can click through it and you can take screen captures or download the picture. And you can make a little booklet of it. And that you can give that to your friends because it's easy read, just 1-2 sentences. So that's a pretty easy read, right? But that's the 2 ways you can donate are right below my video. Hi everybody, and we're going to end the poll right now. Should Japan farmers in Fukushima nuclear wasteland be charged with crimes against humanity? And we have a resounding, almost 90% of the people voted unequivocally that yes. We got 43 votes. We're going to end the poll right there. So you can't just check your food for cesium. You got to check your food for plutonium and curium and uranium and americium and neptunium and strontium and 1,000 other fission products. You can't just check for cesium. And if you like, it really, because you're only checking gamma for one type of gamma on top of that. You got to check for alpha, neutrons, beta. It's a nightmare. So reminding everybody that when you donate to me, you're donating to keep this operation moving forward and to keep the expeditions going and everything else. I'm going to do a quick shout out again tonight. Dana Nasana, who's your moderator and a great friend of this planet. And Colette, yes, hi Colette, and Dana, and Thinker, and Peaceware, and Albert, and Richard, Anna C3, Barks and Meows. Yeah, I'm up on BitChute. Yeah, this is not a Sunday school. This is nuclear. Thanks, Dana. And trust me, Mitchell, Dana Nasana hates with a passion having to block or delete people. He really don't like doing it, but he understands this is a nuclear educational. We can't have people coming in and distracting. Katja. Hi, Katja. And Mary Fish. You're welcome, everybody. You don't need to thank me. Thank you for coming and paying attention and learning and trying to make the world better. Robert, the pennies. Andrew B, which is CFINSTR, because his other site doesn't work on YouTube apparently. And Tree Fruit. Good night, everybody. Warren. Did I miss anybody? Just going to scroll up through all the names. We'll come down to the most recent comments in a second, so you can get. You want me to do a show to put your name in there. Dave Holly in the United Kingdom. Yeah. John 2N. Hi, John. IXOXI. I can't pronounce it. Hugs for everybody. God bless everybody. Have a great night. A great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Shayla White. Hi, Shayla. 801 love, honey. Just scrolling through the last couple of names here. Emma Watson was born a male. YouTube. That's disgusting to say that. If you're going to have a debate, have a debate. Don't be a despicable coward and do stuff like that. Daniel, we're almost through. James Lucid. Hi, James. Finally got your titanium vest pictures. I found some more while I was at it and found an abnormality where they actually pixelated the paper suit. Y-Bar, good night everybody. Kathy Burns, wow, we had lots of people tonight. And now down to the most recent comments again. You're welcome, Katja. Yeah, boy, YouTube Yoda. Again, you know, Emma's it's not a problem if she was, but she wasn't born a male. So there's no reason to say that. That's not an answer, by the way. It's not even a good answer. Daryl Murray, good night everybody. We'll call it a quits. I'm not going to get into a knockdown with anybody. Tim Norris. Nirad Yoloft. Butcher a few people's names as usual. You're welcome, Tim Norris. Thank you again. You're not being reasonable, man. Yeah, well, like, that's just nonsense to say Taylor Swift was born male. It's absurd. Just like, this is not the conversation we're having. And so, you have a nice life. Just don't have it here. And I disrespect you for doing that to me at the end of my show. I didn't hide Tim Norris, did I? What the hell? I'm sorry, Tim. I'll fix that. That was an accident, Tim. Yeah, I accidentally blocked Tim that time. So then I just unhit him. It just caused me a lot of grief to YouTube. And now poor Tim thinks I blocked him. I didn't. Let me check out. I'll show you. I just checked. So he's back in. I accidentally had blocked Tim, and his messages got deleted. That wasn't on purpose, Tim. Yeah, I seen that. That's why I mentioned it. Okay, I'll take your word for it. My apologies to Tim Norris that time. I accidentally blocked him. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow, everybody. Remember, there's links below the video to donate. If you don't donate, then nobody's going to donate. So you don't have to donate a fortune. Everybody donated $10. I wouldn't have to be asking. There you go. Tim's back. Sorry, Tim, about that. Richard. Yeah, it's radioactive snow falling. Tree fruit? You did nothing. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Tim Norris, not tree fruit. And he didn't do nothing. I accidentally, I don't even know how I done it, but I accidentally blocked him. God bless everybody. See everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night, folks.